We often think, that getting better at communicating is mostly about learning more words or nailing grammar rules. But have you ever thought that there's maybe this whole other side to speaking well, something deeper? Today, we're diving into a really interesting YouTube video. It's from IELTS Advantage called IELTS Speaking Perfect Pronunciation and Fluency. We're hoping to find some surprising ideas about how we actually connect with people through language.
Yeah, and this isn't your standard language lesson, is it?
Yeah.
What's great is it's a real speaking assessment. You actually hear someone being interviewed talking about everyday stuff, but also more complex things.
Yeah.
And then crucially, you get expert feedback on what worked, what didn't, and why.
Exactly. And look, it's framed around an English test, sure. But our mission here is broader than that. We want to pull out those universal tips for communicating better in practice. The kind of stuff that helps anyone really feel more confident and, understood. It's like getting a peek behind the curtain at how communication actually gets evaluated.
Right. So through this deep dive, we'll look at how she talked about, well, all sorts of things. Exercise, weekends, reading, history, even a pretty memorable story about being late. Plus her thoughts on things like work productivity and AI, which is obviously a big topic now.
And the really interesting part is digging into how she said things, not just what she said, and why the expert picked up on certain points.
Yeah, the why behind the feedback.
Okay, let's get into it. And maybe a good starting point is something relatable. Exercise. Her take was quite revealing.
It was. She didn't just talk about, like, going to the gym. She included dancing, yoga, walking, broadening the definition. And what really stood out was how clearly she explained her motivation, like with dancing.
Yeah, she called it mindless, didn't she? An hour of catharsis. It wasn't a chore. It was, well, enjoyable.
Yeah.
And that's a key thing for all of us, right? When you talk about something you're genuinely into, it just draws the listener in. That enthusiasm,
Yep.
it's infectious.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And you compare that to how she felt about lifting weights. She used words like monotonous, cumbersome, boring. Very clear she wasn't a fan, which highlights another point, I think. Being authentic. You don't have to pretend to like everything. Being honest when it's appropriate builds a kind of trust.
Makes it more real.
Yeah.
She also mentioned liking both indoor and outdoor exercise depending on the weather. Practical. It shows flexibility, adapting, and that kind of mirrors what we need in communication, doesn't it? Adjusting our style.
Adapting to the situation, yeah. Good point. Okay, so shifting gears. Weekends. Her experience was a bit different.
Right, because she's a yoga teacher, weekends are peak work time for her, which immediately challenges that standard idea of weekend break. And explaining that clearly, giving that context, that's a skill in itself.
Definitely. She didn't just say, I'm busy. She explained why. And her actual off days, Mondays or Tuesdays maybe, were about simple things. Netflix, husband, cooking.
It's a good reminder, isn't it, that recharging doesn't have to be some grand adventure. Sometimes simple is best.
And in communication, too, sometimes the simple, direct message about what you need works best.
Yeah. Then there was the discussion about breaks, preferring to stay local for short ones, liking her local coffee shop, Gale's.
But also wanting to explore further afield for longer holidays. It's that balance, isn't it, between the familiar and the new.
That desire for comfort, but also, yeah, novelty, something most people can probably relate to.
And connecting on that shared human level makes communication so much more effective.
Okay, let's move on to reading. Childhood books were a bit fuzzy for her, apparently.
Yeah, she couldn't quite recall specifics, but one book from school did stick out.
Many masters, many lives, because of an early interest in spirituality, she said.
And what's interesting there is how a personal interest made the connection stronger. When you talk about something you genuinely care about, it comes across differently, more compelling.
Totally. Now, her reading is more focused on education, yoga, spirituality.
But she also listens to fiction audiobooks, like on Audible, during his commute. So she's adapting how she consumes information.
Which is something we need to think about in communication too, right? How does our audience actually prefer to get information? Written, spoken, audio.
Good point. And on holiday, she leans towards listening rather than, say, dedicated study, switching off.
Understanding the audience's mindset. Are they ready for detail or do they need something more relaxed?
Exactly. She also mentioned preferring physical books, the feel of the pages.
The tactile thing. It's a reminder that even now, sensory details matter in how we connect.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, history. She likes history TV shows, especially crime-related ones like Roman Empire on Netflix.
But she didn't have strong memories of studying it in school. Her interest came later. through her own reading.
Which just shows that passion can spark any time through different ways.
And when you talk about something you've explored yourself because you're curious, your perspective often feels, well, more engaging.
Right. Now let's get into the story about being late. A very relatable situation, I think.
Yeah, she said she's usually punctual, but then described this one time she was really late for work in London.
And the context was crucial. New to the city, didn't know the transport system well.
Exactly, and she told the story well. The wrong bus, the station being closed, frantically trying to find a cab. It was vivid.
Using narrative like that makes the experience understandable, doesn't it?
Definitely. And she mentioned telling her manager, her DM, but there was some skepticism at first.
Which highlights that challenge sometimes of explaining unforeseen problems. Clear, honest communication is vital, even if the message is hard to swallow.
And she clearly felt it was a professional setback. It really underlines how important punctuality is at work.
And maybe the importance of taking responsibility, communicating the impact, even if it wasn't really her fault.
Yeah, that responsibility piece. So this led into a wider chat about being late.
Right. Her view was quite nuanced.
For friends, she felt being late occasionally, if there's a genuine reason, is understandable. But consistently late, that's rude.
So acknowledging the different expectations in different relationships, social dynamics.
But for work, she had a much firmer stance. Because it affects colleagues, the company. She stressed time management.
That distinction between personal and professional is important for how we communicate expectations.
And she gave practical tips, too, like setting personal deadlines 15, 30 minutes earlier, using alarms.
Actionable advice. Always more effective when you give concrete steps, isn't it?
Always. Okay, moving on to work productivity.
She favored multiple small breaks over one long slog to maintain focus.
Yeah, maintaining mental capacity, it makes sense. Effective communication isn't just dumping information, it's about how well it's received. Breaks help everyone stay engaged.
Her thoughts on open plan offices were more on the fence.
Right. Saw the potential for connection, but also the risk of distraction. That balanced view shows critical thinking.
And presenting different sides makes your argument stronger, often.
Yeah, definitely. She also supported a 4-day work week for better work-life balance, less stress, more focus on work days.
Which reflects a lot of current conversations. And when you're talking about changes like that, explaining the why, the benefits, is crucial.
Absolutely. Now, AI in the workplace. Just initial thoughts, really.
She speculated about the film industry, editing specifically.
And she acknowledged job displacement could happen, but also saw possibilities for new kinds of work, using free time differently.
So thinking about challenges and opportunities, that's a balanced way to discuss big shifts.
But she also admitted the financial side, the implications. They're uncertain.
And acknowledging what you don't know is important too, isn't it? It builds credibility, shows honesty.
Definitely. Okay, let's circle back to that expert feedback in the video. This is where we get the real communication nuggets.
Right. The expert loved her natural, developed answers in part 1, said it felt like a chat.
Which just reinforces that idea. Conversational, approachable communication often works best.
And for part 2, the advice was to use personal stories. Helps fluency, coherence.
Makes it easier to follow, more engaging.
Yeah.
Adds that personal touch.
Yeah. And in part 3, handling abstract topics well, developing answers, showing different sides that showed strong skills.
It's not just having an opinion, it's articulating it thoughtfully, considering other views.
The expert defined coherence pretty clearly. Answer the question, then develop the answer. And fluency, speaking smoothly without awkward pauses.
Fundamentals of clear speaking. Her pronunciation got high marks too. Clarity was key.
And those higher level things, intonation, connected speech, stress. Importantly, her Indian accent wasn't a barrier at all.
Exactly. It's about being understood, not having one specific accent.
There was a minor note about maybe speaking too fast when nervous. And a tiny thing with V and W sounds.
But minor stuff didn't really impact clarity. Shows that perfection isn't the goal.
Her vocabulary, strong, accurate words, good range across topics.
Which allows for more precise communication, doesn't it?
And grammar, too. Good range of structures, tenses, a few tiny slips under pressure, which happens to everyone.
Totally normal and spontaneous speech, but overall, very competent.
So the final assessment was basically top tier. A potential band 9, maybe 8.5 at lowest, shows really high proficiency.
Yeah, a really strong performance overall.
So as we kind of wrap up this deep dive, what are the big takeaways here?
Well, I think it really shows that effective communication it's complex, isn't it? More than just words and grammar. It's about sounding natural, using relevant examples, personal stories help, engaging properly with different topics.
Yeah, and being clear, coherent, we saw how these things play out, talking about everyday life, work, even thinking about the future with AI.
And for you listening, maybe take a moment to think about your own style. How do you handle different conversations? How do you manage time? What are your thoughts on work and technology changes?
It all leads to this final thought, maybe a bit provocative. The expert really stressed natural speech clarity. So, what if we focus more on those elements being clear, being natural, rather than obsessing over perfect grammar or a specific accent? How might that shift how we learn, how we connect, how we just make ourselves heard in whatever we do?
Definitely something to think about.